Oh yeah, go ahead, pump it up. I'd love to catch a firefly that's far away. I see your whole crew staring as I put the speed down. You're like a soup can, I'm like Superman. I saw Veronica, the girl that put you off blast, cause you played harmonica in art class. I know you want her to, but you don't move cause you don't have any shoes. You touch a pom-pom, I touch an A-bomb. Aw yeah.
20 nights in the ice is a long time when there's hostels on the hill. It's not about what they want. You just gotta walk your walk.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another On the Sensors video. We are back with our How to Destiny series. So I've got here Polyfly and the 86. Jack is missing today, so we'll miss him, but he'll be back for future videos. So yeah, just wanted to, again, encourage everyone, join us on the Sensors. We play with real cards and dice over webcam. So we'll have a link to our channel in the description below, an invitation to our Discord. So please come join us and play some games. We'll see you at the table soon, hopefully. But yeah, this is what, guys? This is episode 2, or no, this is episode 3. So last time we talked about win conditions. We talked about team building, but it was really high level, and it was a lot about like, what are your preferences? What characters from the films or the TV shows do you like? And so you might, gravitate towards those characters. And we talked about battlefields. But today we're going to go a little deeper into team building, right? And a little more strategy on that. We'll talk about some characters, team building, the magic number 30. We'll talk a little bit about resource management. So yeah, we've got a great video for you guys today, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So first up, dice. You guys ready to dive in? Talk about dice?
Let's roll.
Dice win.
Roll.
Dice.
Boom.
Dice wins games, right? 86.
Dice win games, as we said in the last video. So one thing that's really great to start off with is having two what's called elite characters. So a character has 2 values in the bottom left. The first number is going to be their single die value. The second number is their elite value. So you're rolling in 2 dice with them. Some characters may only have 1 value, so they can't be elite. Typically, that's going to be non-unique characters, but most characters that are unique or you can't have multiples of, they're going to be able to have 2 dice. More dice starting off is going to be a ton better than less die, even if your die are really great. There are some exceptions to that rule, but starting off, the more die you can get into the pool, the better. If you think if you talk ARH, we have Hondo. Hondo has 2 set-aside pirate loyalists with him. You're rolling in, great. That's 3 die. You don't really need him to be elite if you can get someone else with 2 die. But him elite by himself, great, and then you can fit another character. Phasma would be someone else that's an exception. Single die, Phasma gets 3 die in the pool, just like Hondo. A classic example, can't talk, is Arinda Price and Voss. So you'd have single die Arinda Price, and that would be a special in her could turn 1 to any side. So you use her die to turn to a Voss special. So those are all exceptions to the rule, but typically more die is better.
So
die are going to get removed. I'm sorry, go ahead.
86. So let's dive into that. Some of the reasons why that is, right? We talked about battlefields in our last video. More dice means you're more likely to win the roll-off, right? I mean, that's one example of how more dice starting the game can be better. If you've got an asymmetric battlefield that benefits you more than your opponent, then you want to win the roll-off, and so that's one other way. And you mentioned this last time too, but everything in the game is a resource: cards, dice. And so if you have more dice starting the game, you're going to sort of have more things to do, more more resources potentially in your overall toolkit. So
And a point to that too, it's not just always about playing 2 elite characters. You could squeeze 4 characters, single dice apiece, in some team setups, right? Depending on what you want to do. And we talked about that last time, what your deck wants to do. And so having 4 wide characters with still having 4 dice still allows you to do that. It's not always just about having 2 elite characters.
And there's some balance of quality and quantity as well. I'll say this: if you talk ARH, so right now Ozzel is someone who's 2 die is a 9-point cost, and he's great to have in a deck. But at the same time, what are you going to do with his die? They're going to be 1 discard sides, 1 health, 1 resource sides, 1 indirect sides. They're good and they're cheap, but they're not going to have that value the other die will.
Right.
Good example though of him, 9 elite for 2 dice, pretty low health, but his die, I mean, it's at least consistent, right? I mean, you're getting he's a great support character, in a 3 wide or also you talked earlier about typically, maybe 2 elite characters is better. I think there's a lot of strong decks right now, sort of that middle, right? We've got 2 elite characters, and that tends to be pretty strong. But some exceptions to that might be if a character has an ability, right? Like Benthic and
Oh yeah.
some of the Wookiees, right? If you can run the plot, the Valorious Tribe, to turn that Wookiee healing online, like you're okay with running one of those Wookiees non-elite.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be exceptions that direction to the rule. Like there's exceptions to the rule of only running a single die for a character that at a higher point cost because they bring extra dice to the table. But then there's also the flip side. We saw a lot of big small decks in the last FFG standard rotation. Like you saw Big Palp with Watto. Or you saw Vader, right? Scary Terror to Behold Vader with a Faust. So Foss was bringing a single die. Now, granted, you were using him as a meat shield, and to keep Vader alive. But we saw a lot of those combinations. So those are, based on what your characters are doing, could also take into the fact that I'm okay bringing just a single die for that character.
Yeah.
And also add on to the meat shield comment. It's not necessarily you bring the Foss to the game just for the meat shield or the extra health, but sometimes you just do it for the color. Like,
right.
I want to put red in this deck, and this is a good way to add in red.
Right. Yeah. There's also, we'll get into deck building here, later in this conversation. But yeah, color. What other colors, based on what your deck wants to do? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the big exception to this rule, I'm just gonna throw everything out the window. And what we've talked about are the Ewoks. Ewok warriors are 4 cost, no die, dealing indirect damage when they're activated. There are dice Ewoks for Chirpa and Wicket, but you can get a lot of Ewoks that don't have any die, and that's still
Yeah.
That's
a terror of a deck.
That's a whole.
Diceless characters are very interesting.
Yeah. That's a whole different archetype.
Yeah. So, but I like the fact that you mentioned big, little, Poly, right? I briefly mentioned like middle would be like what? Anakin, Leia. A big little would be something like you said, like a Vader and a Faust, right? In the previous rotation, and so and then you've got what, 3 wides, sometimes 4 wide. It's like every deck has its own sort of feel and style to it, and yeah. So,
Yep.
what do you guys think about factions? You mentioned 86 that you might only bring a First Order Stormtrooper just to have red, and that's interesting. Maybe you really want to play Pulverize, or who knows, right? Or you're playing some troopers and you really need those control the battlefield cards. But I think we can maybe move on to some factions and hero versus villain. Blue, red, yellow.
Gray.
What do you guys think?
So one thing to note, when you're building your team, you can only have hero with neutral, or villain with neutral, or neutral by itself, depending on what characters you have. So if you only have neutral characters, only neutral cards in your deck. I think that each of us probably see what some colors do better than others, and that's something that's very apparent in the game. And there's some colors that have advantages and some colors that just don't do things as well as other colors, and they can't. And I don't know, maybe you guys have an example of one. I'll kick one off with, if we think of yellow, so we have Wada, we have Jabba, truces. Yellow is a color I think of money. Whenever I think of money, I think yellow. If I want to make money. And there are some different decks where, red might be good for making money too. But, immediately starting off, if I want money, I'm going to think yellow.
Well, you've got classic cards in yellow that make money. You talked about Truce, right? Newer
Mhm.
cards like Reap. That's a yellow card. It's neutral. You can play it in any deck as long as you have a yellow character, but it's yellow. It makes money. Bait and Switch was always a card, and it was in yellow. So yeah, yellow makes a lot of
Mhm.
money. I also think of yellow, maybe more yellow hero, to be more of the action cheaty style. Now, back in FFG, back when Yoda Weisenmaster, this one with the special chaining Yoda, he was action cheaty, so that made blue action cheaty. But I think yellow has more of like the instigates, the ambush cards. We have dash now that gives everything ambush, right? And so I think yellow as money, but I also think of it as maybe more yellow hero, more as action cheaty, quick, go fast. Now red, like you mentioned, yellow does money. You think about money, but red makes money too. And I think red in the current ARH meta, and probably the last FFG set, does a lot of action cheating too, right? We have Seize the Day. You have the battlefield, take 2 actions, right? A card off the sensors, activate 2 of your characters or supports, so that gives you some of that speed as well. So I think anymore, a lot of the colors maybe bleed into each other, but I think in terms of factions, I think hero yellow more cheaty, maybe villain yellow more money.
Yeah.
I agree
And
with that completely.
yeah, and I think blue, right? We talked about this earlier, but blue tends to probably have the hardest time of the 3 making money,
Yeah.
and so sometimes you just have to be okay with taking some shields. Maybe you don't have money to play your removal or play your upgrades. You have to just maybe play a little more defensively. But yeah, and what do you guys think hero versus villain? Um, it's so hard to just sort of encapsulate so much in just in two words. But what do we think?
I I play more villain these days. I used to play a lot of hero because I liked to me, hero played more of a stally game. When I first started playing this game back in Legacy's block, hero played very turtle up, shield. Again, I was playing blue hero. So it was more, set your game up, survive long enough to set your game up for one big swing. And I think these days, me playing villain more, I think it's more because um, I can do a lot of little damage here and there before a deck can get set up, before my opponent can get online, right? We talk about win conditions and doing more damage than your opponent can before the end, before they can get set up, and so that's how I feel hero and villain is these days. But I mean, I know that every faction and both sides obviously can do both things pretty well.
Yeah, and I know Jack
So
mentioned this last time, but villain I know you probably will touch on this 286, but a lot of damage out of hand. Maybe a bit more aggression even. Is it fair to say that with villain?
I think so. I've always thought of villain versus hero. Like if I punch you in the face and then you punch me in the face and we just have a fist fight, that's villain. Hero is going to be more, you hit me, I'm going to turn the other cheek. You hit me again, and maybe, I'll just stand by and I'll kind of build up and maybe I'll mitigate some things. But essentially, I'm going to snap and I'm going to hit back. And when I hit back, I'm going to have some things that aren't going to be good for you. Blue is kind of interesting in talking about that in the hero versus villain aspect because you can see it the most in blue. If you look at abilities, for example, there are a lot of cards that we have performs. Those are neutral, so those can go to anyone. But we have and had hero abilities that, if we look at something like Force to Jump, it just blanks your die and rolls back into the pool. It is never removed. it is really annoying to just, okay, I just rolled out for damage die. Oh, you force jumped it. Oh, and it rolls back into another special. So if I roll for damage die, it's pointless. Okay, I understand. And you can keep resolving it till you get a shield.
Hmm.
So force jump is something that was, it's not in the ARH meta, but in the FFG meta, like, man, it's for one cost, it got so annoying.
Yeah.
Um, but if you think of villain, you can think of a lot of abilities there. Death Field is something that is exclusive to villain. The worst case scenario, you're either going to get 4 indirect or 4 discards a turn. The best case scenario, you're going to deal 8 indirect for 2 resources, or you resolve 2 specials, and depending on what the other character has, you may do like 12 damage.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty mean. So you made me think of something though, 86, and I think it also helps to highlight that sort of hero-villain dichotomy. So continuing on with that, with blue, right? Think about the Quillen lightsaber. If you play it on a hero character, it heals a damage. If you play it on a villain, it does 1 damage, right? So like, what better way to describe that sort of the difference, right? Hero is gonna try to have a little more staying power, maybe be a little more defensive or wanting to build up. Villain just like try to burst you down, kill you fast, you know, and yeah, so it's a bit of a race sometimes. And I guess it's interesting to say all that because again, if you're a new player watching this, think about these things as you make your deck, and you know, I think we talked about this earlier, but sometimes it does just come down to how many dice can you get out there. You want to play something that is hero because maybe that's you like a character from the films, and then okay, now what do we talk about, right? The magic number 30. So then you're building around that, and so you want to try to maximize your dice, like we said. So, what else, guys? Health.
I'll interrupt you. So we
Yeah,
talked a
yeah,
little
go.
bit about yellow is really good at making money. Blue has exclusive abilities. We talked about a little bit. And there are a lot of things that blue can do differently because of the abilities. What do you guys think that red has?
Red, I think benefits from battlefield control. So we see cards like in FFG meta was Rex and Cody, right? Rex, if you spotted a clone trooper, paid 1, you could, when he activated him, you could take control of the battlefield. Veers, take control of the battlefield, power action, right? The new battlefield perimeter outpost, only play it if you spot 2 red characters. You can only include it in your deck. I think red does really good things. Now, aside from characters, I think they also have a lot of great only do things if you control the battlefield cards, or give the battlefield to your opponent to play this card type of situation. One of the new cards from the ARH meta is Tactical Retreat. Give the battlefield to your opponent for 1 resource to get as many shields as you have characters, and to give them to you as you wish. Like that's a newer defensive position, right? I mentioned earlier, Seize the Day. Play only, you gain 2 actions if you control the battlefield. So I think red does battlefield shenanigans, and which coincides with some action cheating, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about red, it's like it's your commanders, your generals, your troopers, right? And in the Star Wars universe, blue is your Force users, your Jedi, your Sith, and the yellow guys are those like your scoundrels, your rogues. And yeah, I mean, red, yeah, it's like the troopers, it's the generals, it's and when I think red hero, obviously healing comes to mind. A lot of healing cards. On the villain side, I think a lot of hand control, hand hate, and then just when I think about red overall, it just sort of just dawned on me like there's a lot of damage, bursty cards coming from red. You've got power surge, you got focus fire, pulverize. And I think those are all except for power surge. Pulverize is villain, power surge is hero, and then focus fire is neutral. So yeah, it's interesting. All right, let's switch gears, talk about health. You made a great point about the health of your characters, and someone like Luke Skywalker, Red 5, man, look at all those damage sides. 4 damage sides, but only 10 health. And I just think that's such an interesting concept. You know, if you're a new player, you might look at that and think, yes, please. You know, I want that. I want that. I want Luke in his X-wing, but he's pretty squishy. So, what do you think?
So squishy is a term we use if something is low health, and you might hear tank if someone has a lot of health, if they're hard to kill. So with that, each side of a die has about roughly 16% repeating, 0.6 repeating to roll.
roughly.
So if you think of a die that you want, each time you roll it, if you're looking at one side that you want to get, there's a 16% chance you're roughly going to get that side.
1 out of 6.
I think cards like that, ones that have low health but high damage output, fit into that aggro type of theme, right? The ones who have low health and have crappy dice or not great dice usually have a decent ability or something to go along with them, or their die maybe is one that you're okay only having one die for because of the ability that he has, right? Or that character has. I think Luke Red 5 is a great super quick aggro get underneath a deck that wants to set up character, and you have to kind of evaluate that and take that into consideration. How do you keep him alive though? Like being squishy, you don't want him to get spiked. Like I said, you don't want him to get spiked off the table round 1. So when you're building your deck, what do you do to keep him alive? Keep any squishy character alive. Like if he is your main damage dealer, you got to keep him alive, right?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, right? So going back to your 30 points and team building, and so you've got one character with relatively low health but a ton of damage output. You need someone else. So he has 10 health, right? So your other character should probably have more than 10 health, right? Or maybe we should say shouldn't have any less than 10, because right then you're looking at less than 20 health total, and I think health is an interesting concept in Destiny, because you think about your total health pool. I think like a good, and it's so hard to throw out numbers, but like 20 is actually kind of low, right? 25 is, or 24 if you get 2 12 health characters, maybe sort of like middle is pretty good. But if you're running 3 wide, you can get into the high 20s, even low 30s. But it's a very important concept. So you might have a really good strategy, but if your characters die too quickly, like it's just no good.
Well, his die sides have 2 guns, right? 2 gun plus 2 gun, and then
I think there's 4 guns.
Another-
one range, 2 range, plus 2 range, and 2 for 1.
So if you roll without having to pay anything for his dice, if you roll him elite, he's doing 4 damage. So depending on who you pair him with, it's probably going to be another 15 cost, maybe 11 health, 10 health. I mean, the deck that comes to mind with me is Dak, right? He's got another 2 gun sides that you can run elite. So you have 2 characters, elite, at about 20, 21 health that are doing 8 damage. So just think about that. If you walk up to the table holding 20 health and you can take 8 damage in 1 round, like that's you're only going to last 2 rounds, right?
Yeah, I just think health is such an interesting, like I know when I first started playing this game, it never really occurred to me. Health pool. It's just such an important, concept. How much of it do you have? And especially if you're playing an support related deck, every hit point matters, because once your characters go down, you don't care as much because you're not playing upgrades on them. You just have these supports to roll in. And as long as you have 1 health left in 10 supports, you can still activate all those supports. And I know back in the day that I used to love playing 3 wides, which is a bunch of support. So
Chip in a chair.
Chip in a chair, that's right, man. So I think you made a great point too, 86, about earlier die sides. If you really want to play lightsabers, a bunch of melee sides, you have to really think about the events you play that go with that. If let's just say you are running blue-red, but you only really have a couple of die sides that have ranged on them, you're probably not going to include, to your point, focus fire, because that you have to play that on range sides. So I think that's something that you really have to look at, when you're throwing your deck together.
Well, let's talk about the deck then real quick, right? So when we're talking about putting the deck together, right? The natural thing to do for a 30 card deck is the rule of thirds, right? So depending on your composition and what you want to do, normally you're going to have maybe 10 events that are probably going to be mitigation or maybe make some money depending on what colors you're in some way. You're going to have maybe 10 supports if you're playing, a mild support deck, or 10 upgrades to go along with that if you're playing maybe, like you said, sticks, lightsabers. Bounty hunters are going to play a combination of downgrades and upgrades in that 10. So you're going to have roughly 30 cards that are going to be a mix of 10, 10, 10, 10 events, 10 upgrades, 10 supports.
Yeah, and it's a great starting point, right? I think you don't want to. I think it's a great starting point that you wouldn't ever just build a deck with 30 upgrades. And then it's like you don't start with 30 upgrades and subtract from there. It's like you start with 10, 10, 10, and then you add and subtract from those
Right.
3 columns.
Unless you're playing Dryden, right? 86.
Yeah.
Then you
It's
play
just all expensive things, and then just
10 5
all
cost
supports.
upgrade
Yeah.
supports.
The 30, just 30, and then all special them in. Do Dryden. I personally hate Dryden myself, but that's another topic for another time. To do a thesis on why I hate Dryden Voss. But yeah, one thing that's kind of interesting with that too, picking the cards that go along with that. So your characters all have subtypes. So since we talked about Luke, Red 5, he's a pilot. That's his subtype. And I can't remember if that one is an apprentice or not. You might have to refresh me here. But
Flash it up.
okay. So, one thing that is, critical in that, you're going to have spot requirements on characters. So
Yeah.
having fluid or post is to remove a die showing damage. It is a spot blue. If you play it with a red character, let's say you play Luke and Dak. Luke has 10 health. He's going to go down fast. If you have fluid or post in your deck, once Luke is gone, fluid or post does nothing because you can't fulfill that spot requirement. So it is essentially a dead card.
Yeah, that's
so
critical.
the spots are very necessary that you have that character there.
Yeah. And you really got to take that into consideration when you're building your deck, right? What's the health pool of your characters? Am I going to include Desperate Measures, Electroshock in a yellow deck where my character maybe is, I don't know, Bing and 2 ISBs,
Yeah.
I
Bing's
don't-
going down first.
Yeah, Bing's going down
Probably
first. I'm not going to be playing those cards anytime soon.
Just to make the example extreme, let's say you have a DM and it's spot a yellow. If you play a Pike Sentinel, it's Guardian. Ideally, you're going to use it to Guardian. It has no die, so it's going to die quick, is what you're intending it for. But once Pike Sentinel dies, you have no yellow.
Right. Dead cards.
So keep in mind, splash of yellow is good, or if you're trying to splash in another color. But if you have spot requirements for that color, then yeah.
Yep. And sometimes
I've done that too. I've killed certain characters just to get the spot requirements offline.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially when Entangle was a thing, right? Wasn't Entangle spot, or Entangle was not spot?
Yep.
It was, yeah.
Entangle and Easy Pickings were both
Yeah.
spot.
Oh yeah, Easy Pickings, yeah.
Oh, I used to love playing that. Easy Pickings on your dice 86.
Yeah, it rolled well. I'll remove them both. Well, what does it matter?
For a new player, upgrades or supports, or a combination?
I think
It's hard, right?
I think the easiest thing for a new player, at least it was for me when I got into it, was supports were interesting because they were a card of their own. They brought a die, and it was something that I could play from my hand that I didn't start with, right? Which is the same thing that an upgrade does, but an upgrade goes away if your character goes away. So you didn't have to worry about losing your support and having that die being completely removed from the game if your character died too. And so I like a support package for newer players because you don't have to fully rely on what your characters are doing. But that's me. That's me.
I would have almost thought the opposite, right? Because sometimes supports, you have to really manage your resources well to play them. There's sequencing, and now you're a little bit slower than usual. But I mean, yeah, I think, we could both be wrong. I mean, I think yeah. There's so much variety in this game.
I mean, it goes into preference, obviously, depending on who you're playing.
Yeah.
If you're playing like the starter deck, look at the 2-player starter deck. It was Ray and Poe, and it was centered around I'm going to play a character, I'm going to play things on my character, and I'm going to beat you in the face with those things. And that's a great way to do it too. That's easy, simple, straightforward. But then if you lose, you only had one character, so it didn't really matter from the 2-player starter game. But once you lose that character, you lose those upgrades unless they redeploy, and then now you're down 5 dice possibly.
So the one thing I think that I think both of you are correct, and I think it depends on how you want to play and if that battlefield was optimized for you that you have. So you mentioned redeploy, so that is you can move an upgrade to another character, so that upgrade
Right.
stays in play. Something like Anakin Saber. Once the character it's on dies, it moves over. I think upgrade decks are a lot faster. So if if you're in a critical situation, maybe you just need to deal damage fast. I think upgrades are going to be a lot better than supports, where you're going to have to roll everything out. Like I've been in that spot with Mega Blaster Troopers. You give 3 die. Mega Blaster Troopers have 2 blanks of die on them, I think. And you roll it out, and it's like, well, that's 3 blanks. Go to the next one. Okay, go to the next support. Versus the character you roll out, you're probably going to have a better chance at damage, I think. And so speed, I think, is more critical with the upgrade decks. Patience is going to be very important with the support decks.
That's a great point. I would completely agree with that. Yeah, and I think you can't really. So I mentioned it very briefly, but resource management. So this is, I think, I know I played with a lot of newer people on the sensors, and we love when new people join, and it's like they're always like, how do I play? I can't understand how I play with a webcam, and we show them, right, and it's always easier than you think, and then you'll notice like sometimes new players, like, they keep ditching the re-roll, and it's like, you have 2 resources, just take the money while you can, because you might not get the chance again. And if you don't play any cards that net you money, or you don't resolve those resources, and assuming your opponent doesn't disrupt you, like, you're only going to make 2 resources per round. And over the course of 5 rounds, it's only 10 resources, and that's peanuts. You can play hardly anything with that, and so you have to really manage that appropriately and take the money when you can. And
And that's
that could be a whole other series on just resource management and strategy. But what do you guys think?
well, I mean, and that's assuming that you're playing a long game, right? Like 5 rounds is a long time for a game of Destiny to go on. Now, to be fair, we have more characters now that are heavier health, and we have more healing cards, and so some games do go 4 or 5 rounds, but I think typically you're going 3 rounds. I think that's typically an average game is about 3 rounds. So you're looking at 6 resources. And so when we talk about what colors make money or what colors help you, with your strategy, then that's when those kind of cards kind of come into play. And out of those 30 cards, or 10, we'll take the thirds out of the 10 events. How many of those are going to be disrupting your opponent, like removing dice, and how many of those are going to be making you money or helping you make money so that you can do what you want to do and play the cards in your hand? I think probably, depending on the deck I'm playing, on average, I'm playing probably 30% of my deck is 0 cost events, or tries to be 0 cost. 30 to 40% 0 cost to 1 cost events, because I know that I can at least play one of them in a round.
Yeah. Resource curve is, I've gotten really nerdy before. I've seen some cool videos and articles out there, maybe from Hyperloops. I can't think right now, and I've actually taken one of my favorite decks, taken a spreadsheet, and said, like, all right, how many 0 cost cards do I have? How many 1 cost cards do I have? How many 2 cost cards do I have? And it literally, you can use the Excel to make a chart or a graph, a line graph, right? And you see the curve, right? And you want your curve to sort of be, you would actually want it to be
A downward.
high to low.
Yeah.
Downward, right? You want it to be high on the left side, right? So more things that cost less, and less things that cost more, right? Because you just can't afford those things.
And those
So-
things that cost more are going to be like your supports and your upgrades. Deathfield costs 5, right? And Mega Blasters cost 4. So those things are high. These are your not necessarily end game, because if you can rush to get there, then great, you can do it round 1. But these are like your finish the game style events, and so you're not going to load your deck with 6 4 cost, unless you also load your deck with ways to make money, or your characters are money makers, and then you can do that. Blizzard cost 8, and you can't reduce it, but I've seen it hit the table so many times because it's played in a deck that makes money, right? So you really have to take resource management into account for that.
I want to say one more thing about actually 86. I know a lot of times, you'll play Qui-Gon, and I think one thing you've done really well is, I'll remove, so Qui-Gon rolls out, right? I'll play a Jedi Mind Trick or something, and you split them up. I remove the damage related dice pool, and then you're left with maybe a couple of blanks, a couple of resources, and I've noticed like you'll just take the money sometimes. You just take it because you know that over the course of the game, Qui-Gon just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and at a certain point, you're going to just overwhelm me with dice, and there's no amount of removal that can get rid of that. And when we've got Jarkai on, those dice become so potent, and so it's like you said earlier, Paul, like sometimes you just got to play that long game, and you've got to be patient. Don't ditch to reroll. If you have an opportunity to take some money, just take it, knowing that, all right, well, I'm just going to play this lightsaber then. Not going to hurt you right now, but I'm going to play 2 weapons that will kill you next round. So it's just a different way to think about it. I know when I first started, I didn't think about the game that way.
I think with that, talking about all this and getting resources and shields, there's also a point of knowing when not to get resources, because your opponent can take them, they can disrupt them. And there's a point to know where you have to understand, like, oh, you have a 3 disrupt showing. I have 3 resources. There's a good chance my opponent's going to resolve that. What can I do to burn those resources? And sometimes maybe I just need to do it now.
So, what else, guys? I think we're kind of coming to the end here. We've talked about a lot. I know we still probably could have entire videos dedicated to some of these topics. We touched on some of them in greater details than others, but we talked about team building and characters, elite, non-elite, factions. We talked about health and subtypes and upgrades, supports, resource management, spot requirements. We talked about a lot. Any closing thoughts?
I think one thing that is important to go in is realize what you'll hear a lot of people say the word auto include. So, what you're going to put in the deck, no matter, Forsaken is an auto include for blue. It's
Blue villain, yeah.
remove a die, blue villain, I'm sorry. Remove a die showing a value of 2 or less if a player has only 1 die in their pool. It's 0 cost. You can play it and remove something very easily with it. Nullify if you know you're going to have shields. That's an auto include. If you have a pilot, eject.
A sail.
I would realize, a sail. I would realize what are auto includes for what you're doing. What can you put in your deck that just needs to be there? A lot of blue decks will run Neiman. If they're going to run Neiman, they're going to run Draw Closer. What needs to go with what other cards?
It's a great point. I think sometimes auto includes end up equaling 6, 7, 8 cards sometimes, and then now you only have 22 spots left in your deck, right? If you've got 8 auto includes, sometimes it can really help you to know what those are and just start your deck with those. Like you said, 86. If you're playing blue villain, 2 Forsakens, bam, done. For me, like if I'm playing yellow, if both of my characters are yellow, or maybe I'm playing a 3-wide, 2 are yellow, or if I got a really high health character who's yellow, Headstrong's going in there. So, I think that's a great point.
Before ARH and FFG, anytime I played blue villain, I would always put in Forsaken, Hidden Motive, and Doubts. So it would be 6 cards that I knew would go in every blue villain deck I had.
Yep.
So, and those are all removable that are 0 cost.
Polly, what are some of your auto includes?
Well, I've been playing a lot of pilots, so assail, eject, merchant freighter. Those 6 cards in every deck. Right now I'm playing Veer's troopers, so riot shields go in automatically with Veer's seizing territory, taking charge, cards that auto take battlefields or give me a little bit of ambush play. So those are auto includes in a lot of the decks that I play. If I'm playing yellow, more than likely I'm playing an entourage package. So I'm playing reaps and truces to try to get the money quickly, so I can get cards out and do more damage. So.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, I think we're coming to the end here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. So this has been the how-to on the Censors How-to Destiny series. We will continue to bring you some new content on a regular basis. So we're happy to even have, here's some feedback, right? Please put some ideas on in the comments if there's something you want us to touch on. And yeah, I think with that, we'll go ahead and say adios here. So we've got 86, Polyfly, and I'm Majo, and thanks guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Adios.